welcome back to Psych Your Ways to Success. I am your host, Claire Bike, and
I'm Heather Fife.
awesome. And today we're going to change it up and do something a little different. Today I get to put Heather on the spot. So this is going to be fun. I'm actually going to run a mock interview with Heather and ask a bunch of questions that will help us determine communication styles. The one thing that we really talk about quite often here in IO Psych, in work in general, is probably the largest complaint is whether or not communication is happening. And if it is happening, is it happening in the right ways? So sometimes the best way to determine whether or not somebody's going to be really good at communicating is figuring out that at the point of hire. So Heather, have you ever had to interview this way? Like just making sure you ask these types of questions?
Yeah, you know what? This is basically how I generally have interviewed with any company I've worked for
Mm-hmm.
or built myself because it's fascinating. I love understanding this because you really need people to be able to work together. And if your
Yeah.
communication styles are off, then it's going to be real hard to work together.
Yes. So a couple of the lists that I have going right now and what I'm going to be reading from is type of verbal communications, general communication styles, as well as listening and understanding. So how we can ask questions that can really get down to how you listen and understand in the ways. What are your listening skills? Always a fun one. What are your nonverbal communication styles, as well as your clarity? Empathy, things like your adaptability and flexibility. So, you ready to get started?
So ready?
Awesome. I don't ever get to hear that when I talk to people about interview questions. So, this will be fun. So, we always
Not
talk
sure what
about,
I'm going into.
I know. Well, that's kind of why it's fun for me, too.
I know, I get it. I get
Yeah.
it. I get it. I
Um,
love it.
a lot of the questions that we came up with are the questions that are open-ended. So, the questions I think we all in interviews hate answering are the could you provide me an example of a time when, right? Dot 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 and fill in the blank. So a lot of these are that. So I think my one suggestion to everybody, and please jump in here too, Heather, is when you're asking these questions, if you're asking them to one person, make sure you're asking them to every single candidate, right? Like standard across the board, have the same questions ready for every single candidate that you're interviewing. So, yeah. Thoughts?
I agree. And I think the one thing that you mentioned that is imperative is that they're open-ended questions.
Yes.
Yes and no questions don't really help.
And I'm a fill in the space with talking person, if you haven't already noticed.
Shocking.
I know, really big time shocking. But give people the space to continue answering. You'd be amazed with what people will continue to talk about, good, bad, or otherwise. It's very interesting. So let's get started. Um, First question for you is, can you share an experience where you were successfully persuaded others to adopt your idea or solution? What strategies did you use?
Successfully. Oh, such a great
I
question.
know, right?
I love it. Well, so in the dermatology clinic, when I was building it out, I wanted to switch the culture.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really difficult to move a ship when it's going in a direction. And so I needed to get the other providers and managers on board with the direction I wanted the company to go into.
Mm-hmm.
So the strategies I used is I put together a team of select people who volunteered team that was going to look at like improving Vivita dermatology. And once I had that team together, then I had them start talking about what was going well, what wasn't going well. And then I just directed them down the road that I kind of saw it needed to go. And so I got the buy-in by everybody like, oh yeah, that's a great idea. But we were all throwing out ideas. And it just so happened that my idea was the one that worked the best. And so I would say that is one way that I did it is, and honestly, it wasn't exactly what I thought it was going to be. So I had an idea in my mind, the direction that it was going to go and what we were going to do. I'm going to say it went to the left. Mine was far left, right?
Hmm.
And where we ended up was not that far. It was like it was in a different direction, but it moved a lot slower. And, honestly, it worked out better. I still got to the end result of what I was looking for is to change the culture to have a better environment for people to work in. I just, um, by engaging other people, it made the buy-in much better.
Okay, great. All right, so end. What do you think we're trying to get at with this question? So again, I'll repeat the question. Can you share an experience where you successfully persuaded others to adopt your idea or solution? And what strategies did you use? What do you think the purpose of that question is? Just
Can you work well with other people?
that's one of them. And then the what I'm pulling from it the most is here's this idea and maybe not everybody in your group or team or whatever is on the same page with you. So there's a possibility of serious conflict. And how did you get it from this just idea stage to everybody being on the same page and actually working towards the same goal? Right? So you had to use massive amount of communication in order to have that change happen, right? So
Yeah,
that's
I
the
love
whole
it.
point of it. Yeah.
Brilliant. It's a great
Awesome.
question.
So that's communication level number one. So let's talk about listening skills, and that'll be the next question. So you ready for that one?
Yes.
This is so fun for me.
I love it. I love having you have a good day.
Oh, hey, I hope you are too, though, please.
Oh, yeah.
So, describe a situation where you received constructive feedback. How did you react, and what actions did you take as a result?
Oh, it's another great question. Well, okay. When I first wanted to change the culture, just because I guess my mind is at this, doing this in the company was a big upset.
I bet.
So my mind is just kind of sticking there because I learned a lot through it.
Mhm.
So when I first wanted to change the culture, I did these group lunches where I made before I got this team together and did all of that to get them on my side, I would every month get everybody together and I would teach them something. So, and I remember this one month I did a book on the Nordstrom Way.
Oh,
And I
sure.
talked about like the Nordstrom Way and what it was like to work at Google and like how we need to just be like a more collaborative, happy, da 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 da. And I thought it was like this amazing presentation. I was so proud of myself. I was like, I just nailed that.
Mhm.
And I had no short, probably like 30% of the people that were there, that's a lot.
Sure. Yes.
Tell me that they thought it was very pompous and arrogant of me to stand in front of everybody and explain to them how we should all be behaving. And I was like shocked because all the effort and time and like work I had put into it was a lot. And so when they all said that, I was really disappointed. And so, but I asked them, okay, well, what would work better? Instead of like getting upset, you know, well, one, I own the company. Two, I realized that took a lot of guts for them to tell me that. And so I really appreciated that. And I wanted people to be able to continually tell me that because that actually was the problem in our organization, that there wasn't the allowance of real feedback.
Mhm.
So took a deep swallow of my pride, listened to what they were saying and revamped the whole thing. And that was actually one of the things that like catalyzed us to like such a great company. And I thought about that so many times, how grateful I was that people were willing to say that and that I was willing to listen.
Absolutely. That's awesome. Okay, so and that was a great answer. I think what I took from you on that one, just as feedback, was like first off, you were allowed to have feelings about feeling upset. Like that to me is awesome because you did put a lot of time, you did put a lot of effort. It was guided and directed maybe in the wrong way is what you were hearing. And that's awesome, but you adjusted and you took that pivot and you ran with it, which, like you said, it was a catalyst to creating a really like a well built team that was really cohesive. And I don't know, you've talked a lot about the company, so it sounds like it was a really great place to work while you were there.
I
So
loved it. I
yeah,
really
all right,
loved it.
good. Is there anything else that you would have said, like that you would be looking for in an answer from somebody if you were to ask that question?
I'd be curious if there was ever a time that you got feedback that you didn't take it well. Because, like, I mean, like, that's an example of when I took it well.
Sure.
And there's probably plenty that I didn't take well,
Oh
and
yeah.
and maybe that's because I've grown, or I don't know, maybe not. But I think sometimes it's how people are receptive to feedback is actually more important than the feedback itself, or like what steps they did later. So
Let-
maybe it's what, go ahead.
I was going to say, let me ask a counter question to that though. Do you think that people are aware when they're not reacting well to feedback?
Probably not, but that's actually a great thing to know.
Yeah. Oh, I
Because
100%.
I could pick out things where I haven't been very receptive to feedback as well, even now. And then as I'm saying it, I'm like, oops, sorry, didn't take that very well. Okay, let me actually listen to what you're saying. And I think
Yeah.
that the fact that, like, I'm aware that sometimes I don't take feedback well is as important as the times that I do take it well. So, like, I mean, you're sitting there in an interview, and like most people are gonna like have the best of the best, right? You're not out there to say, like, that's why I'm saying, like, it is interesting
Hmm.
to understand when someone hasn't taken it well and how they've handled that.
So, in other words, what you're saying is, if you feel as though there's an opportunity or a time in which you don't actually see any times where you've taken it back, like you've taken feedback poorly, the problem may be lying with you, unless you've already done a whole lot of work on introspection and things of that nature. I think even
Yeah.
then, I think the best of the best out there, and I am not amongst them, do not take feedback well all the time. So I think that there's always, always, always room to grow. So that's something that really, really try to keep that in mind. And if that's part of the question that you have, I think that's a great opportunity to follow up with, like, how about when you didn't take it so well and what did you learn from that? Is a really good follow up question. So let's move on to nonverbal communication question. Dun dun dun.
Nice. I like the
Describe a
little
time
tones.
when you had to communicate with someone who spoke a different language or came from a different cultural background. How did you adapt your own communication style? She's thinking, everybody, just so you know.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, sorry, I was like really thinking because I'm trying to think, is it you're asking like in an office situation or in a,
I mean,
um,
in an interview, I'm gonna be maybe geared towards office, but I would probably, me personally, I'd accept anything. So if you have a particular moment where you felt as though you didn't do a good job, and this could be another one of those questions: when did you do it really well? When did you not? And what did you learn?
yeah, so I feel like this is a great question because in the dermatology, well, actually, I'll go to investment firm because I talk about the dermatology space all the time. But in our investment firm, we had locations in Brazil, Germany, London,
Hmm.
and the United States. And the Brazilians were, I mean, the loveliest, happiest, most fantastic people on earth. They just really loved life.
Yep.
And I just love that about them. But the hard thing with them is it was really hard to get things done. And, in America, we have to do things on, like, when we say we're going to
The
do
United
something.
States, you mean, or
Yeah, in
okay?
in the United States, like in, like, wherever, California, I would need, oh my gosh, I love it that you just called me out.
Oh,
Oh my God,
sorry.
you're so cute. Um, Thank you.
Yeah, yeah, no. Thanks for
Yes, so
being
in the
open to the
United States,
feedback.
yeah.
That's awesome. Anyway,
Oh my
so
God.
as you were
Yeah,
saying.
so like things had to get done on a timeline. And in fact, I was like waiting for things. So, for example, I had to get some money deposited into a bank, and
Mhm.
I needed it deposited on Thursday so that I could have access to it on Friday. It was like imperative that this happened. So I knew that Brazilians, they take a few days. They say they'll do it, and they always do. It's not that they don't do it, they always do it, but it's generally not on the day that they say they will. And this is totally generalization, but this was my experience with the people I was working
I
with.
was gonna say this is
So
a really good opportunity to just say, based on the experience that you had in
exactly.
the industry that you're in at the time. Yep.
And honestly, it didn't have to be Brazilians. It could be anybody, right? Like sometimes you learn to deal with other personalities. So you're talking about like a different cultural experience.
Yep.
And so this is where my brain went. But also, I've been in California working with people who can't do this either. So it doesn't, I don't know if it's more personality, right? But anyway, so I decided to start asking them like 4 days in advance instead of the day before.
Mhm.
And so it was so, and then by the time it was Thursday, it still hadn't been deposited. And
Mhm.
honestly, it didn't get deposited. And it was really frustrating. And so I always have plan A and plan B. And
Sure.
so my plan B was just wiring the money. And so I figured out that situation and had that done. But so I would say that. And then I would also say sometimes accents can be hard for me.
Okay.
Um, and so I can't hear very well. And
Mhm.
so I can't even hear music notes very well. I my eardrum popped when I was like 20, and I just haven't been able to hear well since, you know?
Gotcha.
And so a lot of times I'm looking at people's faces and I'm trying to understand what people are saying, but it's not very good. Like I half the songs I listen to, I have no idea what the words say. I just love the
Gotcha.
music. So sometimes accents can be really hard for me. So I need people to like talk slower or very pronunciate.
Articulate a little better.
Yeah, and so I generally just need more time to talk to people.
Okay. So that's your
So
adaptate, like that's how you adapt, is that you ask them to change or you
I generally explain to them that my
Oh,
eardrum
okay.
burst, and so
Yep.
I don't hear that well. And so if I keep asking you what you said, it has nothing to do with you, it had everything to do with me.
Gotcha. Okay.
That's basically how I go. And then when I'm asking them, I didn't hear that. Can you repeat that? It's
Mhm.
not as offensive, I think.
Sure. I
Except
mean,
my 11-year-old hates it when I do that. I'm like,
it's
I cannot hear what you're saying. Like I literally can't.
awesome. Okay, cool. I think that was a pretty great answer. Do you have any feedback that you would have for yourself on that answer?
No, but probably should.
No, I don't think that you have to have an answer one way or another. I was just wondering.
I actually feel like I'm in an interview.
Apparently I'm that good at it, everybody. That's
You're so
hilarious.
good.
No, apparently I'm just making you that uncomfortable. That is not on purpose. I apologize.
No, I think it just goes to show that interviewing is very uncomfortable. I
Yeah,
mean, we've been working together for
a long time.
what, almost a year, right?
Yep.
Like, and I am definitely comfortable with you. All of
Sometimes
a
it
sudden we
just
get in
doesn't
an
matter.
interview and it becomes uncomfortable. It's just
Yeah,
fascinating.
it is. Well, the last one that I'll do for today is more of an empathy check. So, s- all right, I'll do this one. Tell me a time you had to deliver difficult feedback to a colleague or subordinate. How did you approach it?
It's like, I always approach feedback with kindness, and my intention is for kindness. And generally it goes better when it's like that. Generally when I have feedback, I double triple check myself to make sure that it's for them and not for me.
Right. Yep.
Because, sometimes like they get you things late, but you got them things late, and so it just becomes this snowball effect, right? So
Sure.
um I definitely check myself first. And I always ask if people are open for feedback.
Okay.
I generally start out that way because
Now you're talking about unsolicited feedback here. This is a time where you had to deliver difficult feedback to somebody. So as a leader, we all have our situations where we have to deliver really difficult feedback in probably awkward situations. I've had my fair share, both as a peer colleague and also as supervisory roles in management and whatnot. So in that situation, what example have you had, and how did you approach it?
Great question.
So today this show is called Stump Heather.
Yeah, I know. I've had a lot of opportunities, and I was just trying to think of which one I wanted to share.
Oh, I bet. Yeah, you're just trying to narrow down
I'm
the
like,
list.
which one is the most? Anyway, I would say, we had a marketing director, and she just was never really accomplishing anything
Okay.
and was always busy and working super hard, but never doing anything. And so I didn't understand what was happening. And we were paying her a decent amount, I mean, whatever a marketing director gets. And so it felt like a lot to me, you know?
I'm sure. As an owner, it always
And
feels like a lot.
it always does,
Yeah.
right? And so I had to sit her down and just say, I've been noticing you've been working hard and not accomplishing anything. Have you
Oh.
noticed the same things?
Mhm.
And honestly, she started crying and she just was like, yeah, and there was all these things going on in her life and she just couldn't get it together.
Okay.
And so we worked together to create a plan, and then that I would meet with her every week, and then we would put together a plan for that week of what she would get accomplished,
Mhm.
and that if she was overwhelmed with things going on in her personal life, that she would just make us be aware so that we could support her in whatever way we could. And I mean, I would say that was one of my better situations, because I was pretty direct. And I'm a very direct person in general in business. And so I think people appreciated that. Or I didn't just beat around the bush and try to I just went at it instead of,
Not adding all the
I don't even
fluff.
know if that's good or bad.
Yeah. No,
But
that's
I
great.
just this is the issue. Do you
Mhm.
see it as an issue? Basically. And then, okay, how can we work through this?
Yeah.
What can I do to support you? What do you need to do your job well?
Okay.
And it always came from a point of I cared about my people. I really did. And I actually wanted everybody to succeed. And I have this underlying belief that I would tell everybody that nobody comes to work to do a bad job. That actually isn't their, I would say maybe not nobody, but I would say the majority of the people aren't coming to work saying I'm going to screw this company over. They want this job as much as you want them to be there. And so they had heard me say that probably multiple times. And so they actually believed it,
Mhm.
because I actually do believe that.
Yep. And that was all at the end of that. I think the purpose of the whole question is to assess the level of empathy, to assess a person's ability to be tactful, assess a person's ability to be effective in delivering difficult information that is typically highly sensitive. Sensitive to them, sensitive to the company, whatever the case may be. So for me, I always suggest, and I would always suggest it to anybody out there, be mindful of the questions that you're asking. We have so many tools out there to assess people's communication skills, and go out of your way to ask those really open-ended questions. So those were just a couple questions that you would be able to throw into the list of things that you could do. I will put those in the show notes as well if you're looking for any of them. I think, I mean, I have a million more questions, but we are running out of time. So, Heather,
Well,
is
let me
there,
ask you one question.
oh God, I was
Would
almost
you
off the
hire
hook.
me?
Yeah, all right, I'm ready.
Okay, would you hire me based off of those answers?
Depends on what role I'm asking for. Yeah. I would say that the last question, I would have been looking for a little bit more empathy.
Mm-hmm.
Just because I think what you had said, and this is all due respect. I think
No,
what you had
please do.
said
I'm
is,
open to feedback.
yes, you are. You said nothing's getting done. And I would have approached it or hoped to see someone approach it with an answer more like, I am not seeing things getting done. Would you be able to fill in the gaps for me if they need
Oh,
to?
I love that.
Right? Like something along those lines.
Yes,
Like approach
you nailed
somebody.
it.
Yeah, I don't know. Just approach somebody with the knowledge that you may not have all of the knowledge, right? Like
Yeah, I
approaching
like that.
people saying, hey, fill me in here and let them tell you their story rather than you trying to tell them their story.
Yeah, I
So,
love that.
yeah, just an idea.
Perfect.
Yeah. All right. Any last words, Miss Heather?
No, I think these are great questions, and I think as you're interviewing or getting ready to interview,
Mhm.
I mean, maybe I'll have you keep asking me these questions as I'm getting ready to interview for jobs because that is so helpful to just think and like the way you're wording it and saying it.
Mhm.
And when you're put on the spot,
Oof.
it's hard to come up with a
Scripted answer.
perfect answer, which is the whole point. I get.
Absolutely, the whole point. Yeah, there's a technique being used right now with a lot of job interviews. They'll send out the questions ahead of time for a certain
Hmm.
number of the questions to kind of remove and lower the anxiety levels for people. But
Oh, that's smart.
yeah, and it's really helpful for many people out there just to be able to pull things up at the off the top of their head is not always the most conducive to certain personalities. And if you're hiring somebody for certain types of roles that are meant to think quick on their feet, then obviously that may not be your direct approach. But understand that the way you approach every role should be in line very closely with the type of job that you're hiring for, right? So the
I
role that you
agree.
want and the people that you're looking for should coincide quite well. So, yeah, those are
I
just a
love
couple
that.
thoughts this way,
I
but
love Thoughts by
communication.
Claire.
Oh, see, so much fun.
So
All right.
good.
Well, I think that's all. That's all I got for today.
Great. That was so fun and helpful. I liked throwing that out there and doing something a little different. I'm curious
Definitely.
what our listeners think.
Yeah, it's definitely different. So, if you guys have any questions, and remember, if you're willing to do this with a friend, it helps. It helps them get ready. It helps them get in that frame of mind that directs them into that way of thinking. Like, I'm going to have to pull instances and scenarios off the top of my head. And once people start thinking in that direction, they can easily access that type of information in the coming days and do it over and over again. So, help somebody out, phone them up and say, "Are you ready for your?" And call up being the interviewer and they're the interviewee from the second you answer the phone or the second you start that Zoom call. It's one of the best experiences I've had with my friends. It really got me ready and prepared. So, and this was really fun to do with you, Heather. So,
I loved it.
awesome. Well, thanks
Thank
again,
you.
everybody. Have a wonderful weekend or day in general. We look forward to talking to you guys again soon. So, wherever you get your podcast, listen to Psych Your Way to Success with Claire and Heather. Thanks again.
Thanks.